Hello and welcome. It's me, Percita, and this is Percita's Paradox. Thank you so much for joining me today. I greatly appreciate you, your time, and effort in finding me on this thing called YouTube. Today, I want to come straight at you and hit you with the idea of what exactly is it that's holding you up from just being true and real to yourself. And you may say, okay, you just going in like for the jugular. Yeah, I'm coming in hot. I want to absolutely just cut to the chase and go, are you really keeping it 100? Are you keeping it real? Are you keeping it in whatever other colloquialism that you can possibly think of? My question to you is, are you really being truthful? Not only to yourself, but to other people. And you may say, well, where's this coming from? You know, here you come. Like what you run into, or who are you talking about this week? I'm actually talking about nobody. I'm just thinking about it from an angle of just listening to so many of my clients and colleagues talk about all the things that they want to do and all the places that they want to go and, you know, just this plethora of stuff, right? And in the end, when it gets down to it, it's just like really them coming to a conclusion that they're just not being realistic and they're not being honest with themselves. I mean, something as simple as, you know, do you want to eat a certain type of a dish could be the question asked. And people struggle with just really being wholeheartedly honest with each other. And then, you know, there's the people who will be on this channel and be like, girl, that's not my issue. I am straight up to the point. I'm going to really make it happen no matter what. And I'm going to tell people how it is, what it is, and whatever. My question to you is, are you finding it complicated to really keep people in your life? Meaning, are you noticing that you intimidate people and you're not trying to per se, but you're definitely in a space where you feel more lonely than not? And I say that because, to be perfectly honest, I think everyone wants to tell themselves that they want to hear the truth. Everyone wants to tell themselves that they want to walk in this place of transparency and realness, right? And like I said, keeping it a buck, keeping it 100 all above board. But the truth is that a lot of us are still very fearful about doing that. A guy that I know, and actually I saw a meme about it as well, so he might have repeated this meme, but it literally said that to literally express your feelings would equate to bleeding next to a shark, and how complicated that could be, because so many times you will be 100 and you will be, you know, forthcoming to someone, and they will literally utilize that against you. Because what we don't recognize all the time is that truth does not necessarily mean that it's nice. It doesn't mean that it's accepted. It doesn't mean that it's wanted, but it does mean that it's truth, right? But then the irony of even that statement is that truth can be defined by different people in different ways, and everyone has their own version, quote unquote, of what they feel like the truth is. So when I pose the question, are you keeping it 100? I want you to understand that that can be literally laid out in so many different ways that if you don't understand that part of the keeping it 100, you could find yourself very much so misunderstood and very much so in a place of just continuously feeling as if the world is against you or no one understands you and how you're really feeling. So let's talk about it today on how we can actually think about our emotional intelligence in regards to communicating with people and understanding that everyone has a translation of what they feel like truth is. And the key is to not necessarily diminish the idea that a person is not being realistic, but it is this idea of understanding that you can have different perspectives and be able to hear both perspectives in order to come up with a combined understanding of what the truth is in any given situation. You might say, well, why would I want to do that? Because if I'm saying that it's the truth and what I know is the truth, and they're telling me that it's a lie or it's not the way I see it, then it would have to be wrong. Well, you know, I mean, I get that angle as well. I mean, I would love to tell you that everything I say, every angle that I think everyone else should think, but I'm learning to expect myself in other people is what I'm trying to avoid. And even in my idea of keeping it 100 to myself and to others, it still may come up in some sense of convolutedness because of the way that my emotions may piggyback off theirs, or the way that they may pivot in regards to the way that we are talking or exploring something, right? So first things first, I think you really have to understand where this is all going to start and end. I think there has to be an intent going into your idea of keeping it 100, meaning, number one, you have to be intentional. And in being intentional, you have to be clear in what it is that you're saying, even if it doesn't make sense to a person, because you want to at least get it out of you so that you can then figure out if they can actually translate it to the way that you see it. Meaning, if you're not telling the whole truth, and I love this because people will say, well, girl, I didn't lie. I mean, well, I just didn't tell you that part. Okay, well, look at it from the angle of if you're not giving the person the entire outfit, right, or the entire list of ingredients, and you're trying to get them to actually make a dish or put something together to wear, you're giving them a disservice, right? That is a complete disrespectful angle because you don't want to just assume that someone can't handle it. Give them all of the pieces and let them decide. That's number one. Number two, you definitely want to be in a place of understanding that your perspective might not be the general perspective of everything. Meaning, you may believe that it's truth for you because of the way that you approached it, which is why we went from being intentional. You want to know what that was and you want to try your best to explain it. Now, again, number three, doesn't mean that they're going to receive it. Doesn't mean that it's going to be easy for people to really embrace the idea of what you're saying, but you want to be okay with the fact that they're not okay. You got to be okay with that because so many times we get upset, right? We really get upset when we are trying to tell somebody yeah, no, forget what you're saying because it was this. I mean, we both know the truth, kind of an angle, and it's very easy to say, but it is a hard pitch because not everyone is seeing it the way that you're seeing it. So you really want to be okay with that. Four, you want to be willing to compromise. You want to be in a space where you understand if it means something to you. Hopefully you understand that. I am never talking about people that you don't care about. If you don't care about the person, keep it pushing, do what you do, moving on. But if you are actually trying to build relationships or save relationships or even maintain relationships, you want to have the idea that you care. Back to number one of intent. It starts there. So you want to be in a space where you're really being willing to compromise. And what I mean by that is you have to really not even go as far as to say pick your battles, because I think that statement is so general and it leads you to believe that whatever you're saying at that given moment isn't purposeful and it does not warrant a place, right? I'm a strong believer in, of course, you want to, not take everything to the extreme of an argument. But I feel like if it's important to the person that I am caring about, then it's important to me. And that's kind of where I mean when I'm saying compromise. Because if you catch what I'm saying, if I then take on the responsibility of saying whatever you're experiencing, regardless of if I understand it, it's important to me, and you do the same for me, there's the compromise that makes it very easy to then just leave the conversation in more of a respectful tone, more so than in the idea of who's winning or I was right and you were wrong. There's always going to be this idea of right and wrong because that's just the way it works. I'm going to go with some things are better decided or better solidified by one perspective or the other. Would I say right or wrong? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I mean, and, keep in mind, as a wife, I always think that I'm right. For the most part, there's nothing that I could tell you that I can tell about my husband when we're in discussions that I'm not right. Because I'm the thinker in this household, and I'm the person who usually has to handle all of the day-to-day kids and life, which most females do, I would say. The majority in marriages are that way. Now, there are those men, don't get me wrong, who are amazing with the finances and everything as such, and that's fantastic. So when I'm making decisions, I expect him to not only agree, but to understand that I'm going to be making the best decisions possible for our collective agreement of what our goals are, right? Now, that's easy in marriage if you've had that kind of a conversation with your spouse and you both understand what your collective goal is. A little bit more complicated when it comes to friendships or colleagues or workplace environments, because it's not always a collective agreement on the overall goal. So with that being said, it can get a little complicated in regards to how exactly that compromise would look. But I'm still telling you that if it is crucially important to you to sustain, maintain, or create a relationship with said person, it's going to be very important that you learn to compromise. Okay? It's also going to be very important that you learn to understand that the idea of picking your battles, meaning not taking everything quite so intensely, going back to the last video where I'm telling you to let it go. Those are all key attributes for you to understand why you want to be in a space of really understanding that thing, that number one thing I said, which is your intent. So coming into that intentional conversation with someone, keeping it 100, is why that key, that element, that foundational piece is critical. Outside of that, last but not least, you have to be in a place to really let it go. We're back to that. You have to let it go. You have to be in a space to know that once you've said it and once you have solidified where you stand and you've hopefully come to some sense of an agreement and you've listened and you've compromised, you have to let it go. Nobody, absolutely no one wants something thrown back up in their face. And I think that we forget this idea so much, even when it comes to friends. It's like if you're helping your friends or you're doing something with your friends and you may have had a disagreement in the process, don't be the crazy one to keep bringing this stuff up, even if it's funny. Because I don't know if you've noticed, I mean, it's right back to that really crazy idea of like people are still hurting or people are still feeling a certain kind of a way, or maybe that will then trigger them to come back up and want to be upset with the fact that they compromised on the situation, or they didn't feel like your decision was all that great in the end. Whatever it is, right? You just don't want to be the person that continuously throws things up in people's faces. So when you're keeping it 100, that's it. That's the last moment that you really need to bring that keeping it 100 moment up. You never want to regurgitate that conversation, because that's the part where you didn't really get to an end. You really didn't keep it 100 enough to understand that at the end of that situation or that statement or that moment or whatever it was, it's over. It's absolutely over, because it's just not cool. And I have seen situations and conversations happen where, it wasn't really that serious, right? Like it was kind of like somebody fell, or, it was more jovial and you found yourself laughing through it. And you think, oh, well, that wouldn't hurt to bring it up. It still hurts a lot of people. I hear this more than I should on how someone is still laughing at them, and someone that is laughing with you is not necessarily laughing with you because they don't feel quite that good about it. But it all stemmed, truthfully, from the idea that they weren't really being honest and intentional with their conversation. And instead of them really saying what it is, they said something that sounds like, well, I'm okay with da 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 da. And then they realize, no, they're not okay. Sometimes we'll use that statement because we want to be okay, right? And you don't want to sound petty. So you find yourself going, well, no, I mean, I'm okay with da 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 da. And typically when you say that, I want you to know that that's the thing that you're not okay with. It's the craziest statement, and it's the craziest, most miscommunicated statement of all conversations, especially arguments or especially disagreements. That's the first thing out of somebody's mouth, that they're okay. And that doesn't bother me. Those are the things that bother you. I hate to be the one to break it to you, but find yourself not saying that and being 100 enough to really be able to let it go at the end. If you've done all those steps, letting it go is easy. And you'll never bring it back up because it wouldn't be worthy enough to bring up. You'd be moving forward, trying to actually come up with your collective goal, build your relationship, maintain your relationship, learn to uplift one another, learn to read in between the lines, learn to have better discernment, and all of these things with your relationships, that keeping it 100 would just be a natural process in your communication. So I just wanted to touch bases on that, because I think that that is a statement that I have heard ran to the ground, and it's still a comical place, because typically the person who is saying that they are keeping it 100 is really upset. And what I mean by that is they're dealing with people who they feel are not keeping it 100. And that's why this statement is so important. It's kind of the oxymoron to itself. You want to be in a space where keeping it 100 doesn't even need to be spoken, because the authenticity and the intent of the relationship is so clear, right? It's so transparent that it allows itself to kind of really see itself before it'll make a statement or a judgment or be misunderstood. So hopefully that helped you today. I hope it takes you into the weekend and you're feeling fantastic. I hope that if you have a moment with someone that you love, that you're keeping it a buck and you're absolutely telling them from a loving place and not an angry place what's going on and how it's going on, and you're doing all those other things in order to sustain that relationship and do the ultimate of letting it go. So, as always, thank you so much for joining me. I greatly appreciate you, your time, effort, and energy. As I said, if you have literally been with me this long, at the end of the video, right now, right here, be so kind as to like, share, and comment if you want. Comments, not that, I don't really overly push it because there's not a lot you can really say. But if you're feeling yourself and you're feeling good and you're feeling like I'm looking good, thank you all so much for saying all the kind things that you're saying. I greatly appreciate you. So if you feel like you want to comment, feel free. Also know that the fitness challenge is still running. Okay? So I want you to stay on task and do what you have to do. But no matter what, remember to do 3 things. Live life authentic. Thank you, as always. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.